Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the future of web development. I'm Sean, and in this episode, we're going to talk about the future of mobile app development. I'm going to focus on 4 main points in this episode. Number 1 is that app users, all of us, are going to need apps that help us get things done more efficiently. Number 2, there will be a continued and increased focus on lifestyle. Number 3, progressive web apps will continue growing. And number 4, for you, if you're a beginner app developer, the safest bet is to learn the standard languages of the web for building apps in the future. Now, these first 2 points are pretty straightforward. Point number 1 is that users want to get things done more efficiently. Users want speed and simplicity in everything that we do, as I mentioned last week in the Future of Responsive Design episode. Check it out if you missed it. We live in a world where no matter who you are, all of us are constantly bombarded by information from our devices. Our time is more valuable than ever, and that's why every piece of technology we use should help us to get things done as quickly and as efficiently as possible. Our attention span gets shorter by the day. Let's go. Point number 2, there will be a continued and increased focus on lifestyle, both in apps that are directly related to improving your lifestyle, as well as in non-lifestyle related apps, but that have little modifications to help improve lifestyle. We as human beings are realizing the importance of maintaining a healthy lifestyle amid all this new technology. And a lot of times, a healthy lifestyle means less time in front of screens. So what does that mean for the future of apps? No, it doesn't mean that apps are not going to exist in the near future. Let's be realistic here. What we will likely see, though, is a continued focus on apps that either track our fitness, our sleep, our nutrition, or what have you, or just apps that aren't related to those things, but that make you, for example, spend less time on your phone at night, or not have to have your app 2 inches away from your face all the time when you're using it, etc., etc. The other thing is dark mode. Now, a lot of apps have this feature already. They give you a choice between regular or light mode, where you typically will have dark colors on a white or light background, or you can choose to go to dark mode, which is white or light colors on a dark background. Exposure to light suppresses the secretion of melatonin, a hormone needed for sleep. Staring at apps on your phone in that regular or light mode or normal mode or whatever you want to call it can suppress the secretion of that melatonin and make it harder for you to sleep at night. But putting your phone in dark mode can help reduce that problem. And as a bonus, dark mode can also help save battery and in general looks pretty nice. Now, points 3 and 4 are where we get into some more of the nitty-gritty, nerdy-gurdy details, so hold on tight. Point number 3. Progressive web apps, or PWAs. PWAs may not completely replace native apps, but they definitely aren't going anywhere. So what is a PWA, or progressive web app? Wikipedia says, a progressive web application is a type of application software delivered through the web, built using common web technologies including HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. It is intended to work on any platform that uses a standards-compliant browser. PWAs sort of look like web apps, but give the experience of native apps. Some well-known examples of PWAs are Twitter, Pinterest, Outlook, Google Drive, Google Maps, Google Photos. Those things on mobile versions at least can be used as a PWA. And tomorrows-campus.com. It maybe is not a progressive web app, but it's essentially a web app. Check out the link below if you want to learn web development the same way I did online. I built the entire website from scratch using plain old HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and of course PHP on the back end. And especially the Course Finder tool is essentially a web app because that's where the PHP and the app portion of it comes into play. Check it out, tomorrows-campus.com in the link below. And I remind you guys that you do not need to spend a whole bunch of money and immerse yourself in debt, get a college degree just to learn web development or computer science. You can learn it all online at a fraction of the cost you would at a university. Check out the link below, tomorrows-campus.com. We've got over 1,000 web development courses on all subjects, around 250 of them you can take for free. Check it out, link below. Okay, back to progressive web apps. Progressive web apps are progressive, as mentioned in the name. What that just means is that they give you more features depending on the type of browser or connectivity or capabilities that you have. On all browsers they will work, but you can get even more features if you have a more advanced capable browser or connectivity. They are responsive. They are faster after initial loading. They don't have to reload or re-render every time. And they are connectivity independent because of something called a service worker, which allows for offline usage or for usage in areas of low connectivity. PWAs basically require a service worker and a manifest, among other technologies, but those are the basic requirements. Now, what do those things mean? Service workers are scripts, JavaScript basically, that run in the background, and they allow for things like I mentioned, offline usability, which is huge in my opinion, as well as things like push notifications, extensions and other stuff like that. And a manifest is a JSON file that tells your browser about the PWA and how it should behave when it's installed on a different desktop or mobile device. PWAs are great because they rank in search engines, unlike native apps, and they can be shared with a simple link. And as an app developer, you, my friend, can oftentimes make more money off of PWAs because the App Store doesn't take a cut the way it does with native apps, plus users just don't have to deal with the hassle of downloading the app from an app store. PWAs are generally easier to develop and to maintain than native apps. They kind of combine the best features of native apps and web apps. They have a great ecosystem, community, a lot of different plugins, a lot of great resources for you as a developer to create a PWA. And an American multinational tech company known as Google LLC also seems to think that web apps are going to continue taking a greater market share compared to native apps because Google execs have been talking about expanding current browsers and their features to make it so that web apps can have the same sort of UX capabilities as mobile apps. So what are the possible disadvantages of progressive web apps? Well, some people say that they use more battery than a native app, but that's not always necessarily true. It depends on a lot of factors. And just charge your phone again tonight, the same way you were going to charge it every other night. They're said to be less compatible with iOS devices, but it's hard for me to imagine that being a real problem in the future, especially when you consider that everything that's being developed nowadays is compatible with more device types and responsive to more device types. I doubt that the Apple execs are really going to be that big of dicks that they would totally ignore a huge trend such as progressive web apps and not make it compatible with their devices. And one other potential disadvantage of PWAs is that they're not available on app stores the way that native apps are. But is that really a disadvantage? When you think about it from a speed and simplicity standpoint for the user, is it really an advantage to have things available on an app store when you could just click a link anyway? I don't know, I mean, that's just something to think about, honestly. Sure, the progressive web app or any web app is not going to be found in an app store, so maybe not as many users would find it, but just in terms of user speed and simplicity, why do you necessarily need an app store if all you could just have is a link? That's easier for a user anyway. Just something to think about in the future. So what are the most commonly used technologies to build PWAs? Well, typically they're languages and/or libraries and frameworks based on JavaScript, like React, Angular, Polymer, Ionic, etc., etc. Now, I mentioned in a previous episode that if you, my friend, are a beginner web developer and you know you want to start learning something but you're not sure exactly what yet or what you want to do, but you know you want to get into it, I recommend that you learn either Python or JavaScript, and especially JavaScript if you're looking to do anything with website related or web app related as well. Learn the fundamentals of JavaScript, and then once you've got those mastered, you can break out into a framework or a library or something that helps you specialize a little bit more. But learn the basics of JavaScript first. Which brings me to point number 4. If you are a beginner web developer who wants to make a career out of building apps in the future, the safest play, in my opinion, surprisingly enough, is to learn the standard languages of the web: HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Now, if you don't already know, these are the 3 languages of most modern websites. HTML lays out the elements of a page, CSS gives style to those elements, and JavaScript adds interactivity to it all. Now, why do I recommend in 2020, when we got all these cool new programming languages and frameworks coming out and all types of cool apps and AI you can build, why do I recommend that you learn the basics, the old school basics from the 1990s of the web? I mean, we're talking about apps anyway, not websites, right? Well, as I mentioned, progressive web apps are becoming more popular all the time, and those, unlike native apps, are based on the languages of the web: HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and its frameworks, etc., etc. HTML, CSS, and JavaScript are so ingrained into all things web development, be it for websites or for web apps or for what have you, that it doesn't matter what new technologies come out, they are not going anywhere anytime soon, and are still going to be the building blocks for so many things. App-specific languages, on the other hand, are a little bit harder to predict. Let's take the examples of Swift and Kotlin. Now, if you're not familiar, Swift is the language that's typically used to build iOS or Apple operating system apps these days, and it has been since about 2014 when it replaced Objective-C. Kotlin is an Android programming language that has sort of over the last year or two become the official programming language, or the most popular, the favorite programming language for Android apps as opposed to Java, which traditionally had always been the language for Android. And while Swift and Kotlin are both obviously very popular right now, the thing is that both of them only became such popular languages within the last 5 or 6 years. And who knows if in another 5 or 6 years they'll have been replaced by something newer and better to build their specific apps, whether it's replacing Swift for iOS or replacing Kotlin for Android. We just don't really know. And since these two languages are sort of only known for their abilities to create either iOS or Android apps respectively, who knows if something comes up to replace one of those languages for that specific platform, then what's going to happen to Swift or what's going to happen to Kotlin? We just don't know. We can't predict that. Whereas with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, these are technologies that have been around since the 90s. They're used for so many different things. They're not going anywhere. Now, I'm not saying that you're totally if you learn Swift or Kotlin and then that particular language goes out of style. Because ultimately, if you've learned one programming language, then it does make it easier for you to learn other programming languages in the future. I'm just saying that the safe bet is to learn the web stack, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And then probably a popular JavaScript library or framework after that if you want to build apps. There's another YouTuber developer that I follow. His name is Stefan Mischook. I believe I'm pronouncing that right. He just goes by Steph typically. Anyway, he preaches the same thing all the time. He talks in almost all of his videos at some point or another about how HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and then of course PHP on the back end, the old school web development languages remain king and are not going anywhere anytime soon. I'm going to put a link below to his channel. There's also a lot of talk about something called component-based development, separating the UI into different modules to create more reusable code. Now, without getting into the nerdy-gritty details, it makes things easier on you as a developer, and trust me, if you learn React or Angular or Vue or really any JavaScript library or framework, you're going to learn a lot more about component-based development. You're also going to hear about WebAssembly, which is a binary code format that diversifies the languages that can be used to build front-end apps and can allow for very fast apps. Now, the details of component-based development and WebAssembly are beyond the scope of this video and they're above my pay grade, but as you continue down on your web developer journey or path, you'll probably learn more about these and new trends. Anyway, the key thing here, the thing I want you to take away from this is that you've got to master your web basics first. HTML, CSS, JavaScript, then maybe after that, learn a JavaScript framework and be ready for new libraries and frameworks and technologies that come out. But the best way to prepare yourself for that is to learn the basics, the building blocks, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript first, because once you master those, it'll be very easy for you to learn anything new that comes out or any new frameworks that you need to learn and specialize in. And also work on your soft skills, namely communication. I know we as programmers, coders, we like to sit in front of the computer all day and talking to real people in the real world can be scary, but it's something that you are going to need to be able to do if you want to be a successful developer, either freelance or for a large organization. And this is something that my homeboy Steph, who I mentioned earlier in his YouTube channel, is always preaching, is that it's probably even more important sometimes than your ability to code is your ability to communicate. Communicate with the people you're working with or working for in non-developer language, in common layman's terms. Your ability to do that is going to help you a lot in the future. So learn the basics, good solid fundamentals of coding and good solid communication skills, and you will be a successful developer. So to sum things up, 4 points about the future of app development. Number 1, apps that help you get things done quicker are going to stick. Number 2, apps that improve your lifestyle are going to stick. Number 3, progressive web apps are going to stick. And number 4, the web technologies of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript are going to stick and are a safe bet for you if you're a beginner who wants to learn app development. That's it for today's video, everybody. Drop one of these down below if you liked it. Leave a comment down below if you like. Hit that subscribe button to get notified when the next video comes out. And of course, click the link to tomorrows-campus.com. See you guys.